This is a continuation of 9-6 factoring trinomials of the type ax squared plus bx plus c. And we're working on example 2 where c is negative. Remember, c is just the last term in your trinomial. Before we start this one, I want to look at something. We know we're going to end up with two binomials. And we're working backwards here. Factoring just means breaking it up, splitting it apart. So I know that my FOIL, first times the first, this is going to give me that first term. So in order to get a positive 3, I just need a positive number here and a positive number here. Then my middle term is made up of multiplying my outer terms together and my inner terms together. Remember, we add those together, outer and inner. And I need to come up with a negative number. So we're going to have some combination of negatives and positives here. And then finally, to get my last term, I know I'm going to multiply at last times the last. So I need a positive number and a negative number. And I'm really not sure which one's going to be positive yet and which one's going to be negative yet. That's what I'm going to find out when I use my method to FOIL this thing out. So remember, we start by spreading it out. 3n squared minus 7n minus 6. Actually, let me spread that out a little better. Minus 6. What we just found out from here was, in order to get this last term, we're going to need one positive, one negative. So first, this is my outer plus inner, and this is my last. One positive, one negative. Now, if I'm going to get a negative number in the middle, then I know that my larger number has to be the negative one. If I make my larger factor of negative 6 the negative one, I have a greater chance of getting a negative number in the middle. Hopefully that will make sense in just a minute. So I'm going to start with 1 times 3 here, since that's my only option to get 3. The only factors of 3 are 1 in itself because it's prime. Then if we move over to negative 6, 6 is 1 times 6. But to get negative 6, one of these has to be negative. So first, since I know my larger number is going to be negative, let me show you what happens when you make your smaller number negative. Negative 1. So remember, now we do our outer plus our inner. So our outside terms, 1 times 6, plus our inside terms, 3 times negative 1. And then we figure that out. 1 times 6 is 6. 3 times negative 1, negative 3, plus 6, that's a positive 3. And see, we don't want a positive number. That's what happens a lot of times when you make your smaller number negative. Now, that doesn't mean that every time your smaller number is negative, you'll come up with a positive, but it's more likely. So let's try the other case of making our 6 negative. So I have negative 6 times 1, and that gives me outer, 1 is still on the outside over here, times 1, plus inner, 3 times negative 6. That's negative 18, and 1, negative 18 plus 1 is negative 17. That's too big. Let me try reordering this, though, because there is another option. I could do 1 times negative 6, and let's see if we get a different answer doing that. So now on the outside, 1 times negative 6, plus on the inside, 3 times 1. 1 times negative 6, negative 6, 3 times 1, 3, negative 6 and 3, negative 3. So still not our answer, but it did give us a different answer, so we do have to switch those around. So let me try 2 and 3. 2 times 3. And again, remember, one of these has to be negative in order to get a negative 6. And we want to make our larger number negative so that we get a negative for our middle term, or we have a greater chance of getting a negative for our middle term. So I'm going to use negative 3. So then outer, 1 is still on the outside here, times negative 3 on the outside there, plus inner, 3 times 2 on the inside. 1 times negative 3, negative 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 and negative 3 gives me a positive 3. So see, even though we put the negative on our larger number, we still ended up with a positive, because remember, it just gives you a greater chance of getting a negative. So let's try it reversed. We'll do negative 3 first times 2, because remember, this gives us a different number. We have another option. So we have outside 1 times outside 2, plus inside 3 times inside negative 3. 1 times 2 is 2, 3 times negative 3, negative 9, and 2. Finally, we end up with our negative 7. So I know these are the numbers I'm going to be using, that combination of numbers, to get my binomial. And actually, I can just use these parentheses up here that I already wrote. So 1, it has to be outside and first. So it's right here, 1 in, which is just in. Then 2, outside and last. So here's where it would be outside and last. 3, inside and first. So 3 in, inside and first. And there's a plus there since that 2 was positive. -3, inside and last. So here would be inside and last. And you see if we FOILed it out, we would end up with this, n times 3n squared, n times 2 plus 2n, -3 times 3n, -9n, -3 times 2, -6, combine like terms, 3n squared minus 7n minus 6, which is what we started with in the beginning. So there's our answer. And you can always FOIL it out to check it. Let's try another one where, so see here, b was negative as well. So that's why our larger number had to be negative. So let's look at one where our b is positive. So we're still spreading it out, 10w squared plus 11w minus 8, first, outer plus inner, and last. So we know that we need two numbers that multiply to be a negative. Well, that means I need one negative, one positive. But we need our middle number to be positive. So now we want our larger number to be positive so that our middle number has a greater chance of ending up positive. So first, 10, I know 1 times 10. We'll start with 1 times 10 for 10. And then for 8, I'll start with 1 times 8. And again, remember, 1 has to be negative. We want our larger number to be the positive one, so we have a greater chance of ending up with a positive. So I'm going to put the negative on the 1. Outer, 1 times 8, those are on the outside, plus the inside terms, 10 and -1. 10 times -1. And when we figure that out, 1 times 8, 8, 10 times -1, -10 and 8, that's -2. So see, even putting it on the smaller number, we still ended up with a negative. But again, it just gives you a greater chance. So let's try flipping these around. I'll do 8 times -1. So now I have outside still 1 over here times -1, plus inside 10 times 8. Ooh, that's going to be a big number there. 80 and -1 is about 79, which way too big, so let's try some other factors of 8. So we could have 2 times 4, and again, remember, larger number has to be positive, so -2 times 4 gives us a -8. Outside 1 times outside 4, plus inside 10 times inside -2. -20, positive 4, that's -16. That doesn't work. Let's try flipping around. 4 times -2. So outside 1 times -2 plus inside 10 times 4. 40 and -2, so that's 38. That doesn't work. At least it's positive though. So let's try, now since we've tried all our factors of 8, that means we're going to have to try new factors of 10 with these 4 different combinations to get 8. So let's try a new factor for 10. So that'd be 2 times 5. And I'll start with -1 times 8 again. So outside 2 times 8 plus inside 5 times -1. 2 times 8, 16. 5 times -1, -5. So 16 minus 5. Finally, we end up with 11. So there are our numbers we're using. So we have our 2 parentheses. 2 is an outside number and first, so here's where it would be outside and first. 8 is outside and last, so here's the only place it could be outside and last. 5 is inside and first, so inside and first would be right here. We know there's a plus there since that 8 was positive. And finally, -1, inside and last, so there's the -1, inside and last. Remember that you can FOIL to check it. All right, that does it for example 2. If you need more practice, see your book.